Hi, everybody. Welcome to Woman Up. My name's Leah, and I'm joined by the lovely Sue, as usual. Hi, Sue.
Hi Leah, how are you?
Very well. Bit hot and bothered, but very well. And we're joined today by Hannah. Hannah is a trained disability support worker, um, and is an assistant nurse and hopes to go into the psychiatric nursing field. And she's very concerned with how gender ideology and everything that goes along with it is inordinately affecting people with autism specifically. So I'm going to let Hannah give us a little bit more information on that. So take us back, Hannah, and tell us about how you noticed that people with autism were being disproportionately affected by all of this ideology.
Okay, Leo, great question. I think for me, it goes into what I've seen in practice and also the attitudes toward how gender has become quite different in the last sort of 10 to 15 years. It was always happening before that, but now it's become kind of really concentrated. Um, and the scary thing for me generally with this area is that people on the spectrum, I'm speaking as a person who's had experience with autism simply for the fact I've worked with autistic kids, and I myself are on the spectrum. So for me, I've been able to see it from both sides. And so for me, people with autism have a real trust of authority figures because when we grow up and we're trying to learn how to socialize and how to integrate ourselves in our community, all of this sort of stuff, our parents and our, psychologists or our psychiatrists or our OT or whoever we're going to see will say, if you have trouble with something, you can always go to your doctor, or if you feel unsafe, you can go to the cops. It's a very kind of like knowing what's available in your society and then making sure that you know how to access those services if that needs to be. Which means, following on from that, that people with autism now really, really respect teachers. They trust their, well-being coordinator. They trust in the sense that, if I'm being bullied, I can approach my teacher and my teacher will look out for me in that sort of way. But in the last maybe 10, 15 years, I think people have in those sorts of power positions um, are being neglectful about the way that they have a duty of care toward their students, ASD or not ASD, ASD being autism spectrum disorder. And so what tends to happen is that because autistic men are slightly more feminine and autistic girls tend to be a lot more tomboyish or a little bit not practicing, their feminine outward appearance or outward going. It means that a guidance counselor can kind of coerce a young, autistic person that in fact the reason why that they are the way they are is because they're trans, nothing to do with them being autistic. I'm not saying at all that there is never on the planet, because there's always one at least, someone with autism who's also trans, whatever. But by and large, I think the system is trying to brainwash young autistic kids, and they don't know like the things to look out for if they're being manipulated, right? They can't look out about speech pattern or whether or not that person means well or anything like that. So, if you're struggling with your sexuality or you're struggling about the fact that you're seeing females in your class doing all of the boy things and the makeup and all that stuff, and then you have zero interest in it, and then you want to be with the guys kicking the footy, doing that sort of stuff, And then someone in authority comes through and says, oh, well, actually, you know, people who do that are called transgender, and you can take hormones and you can get in part of this with an impressionable authority figure respecting young child. It's less likely then to say, no, that's definitely not me. It's very likely for them to say, oh, okay, I never knew that was the thing, and they get a pamphlet from -18 or something like that, and you know, off they go.
Yeah.
And it's a very sad thing.
Yeah, I saw a study that said that people who are gender non-conforming are 3 to 6 times as likely to be autistic. And I thought, shouldn't you be looking into that?
Yeah.
Why are you just taking this as a given? Like, surely there's something in that.
They were talking about this on Trigonometry. I'm not sure, Hannah, if you've ever seen that show, a podcast. And they were talking to Hannah,
Hannah Barnes.
Hannah Barnes, who's a journalist, and she's written a book about it. And she was saying around 35 to 40% of children that transition are autistic, yet they make up 1 to 2% of the population. So there's an enormous you can just see from those figures that they're being influenced into doing something that they would never have done. It's shocking.
Absolutely. And something that really bothered me, so because I'm wanting to go into the mental health nursing sector, you do what you do as a student, and you subscribe to any email list about the sector, you get involved, you try, and because the thing is, like, once you get a job, you want to be able to say, look, I've been invested in this for some time. So I'm on the email list of the peak body in Victoria, who runs personal development education that one must do as a nurse, 20 to 30 hours a year to keep practice up and all of this. And the peak body for mental health nursing had run a seminar about autism and gender. That was completely captured. I didn't attend, but a friend of mine did. And she told me that it was basically like, if you're working in mental health and you have someone who, you know, is presenting with ASD type issues, or presenting with ASD type the pathophysiology of that, then basically the advice for our peak body of mental health nursing personal development said that it would be much more likely that it's better to help them with their gender than their autism. So for me, that's screwy, because if their pathophysiology is being autistic, then obviously there's no patho for transgenderism, right? So when we talk about the pathophysiology of something, we're talking about what is going wrong with a normal system, right? So, you know, let's just say patho for, say, asthma, you might say, well, the lungs breathing and it's all normal, and then you can get oxygen in, and then the gas transfer happens, it's normal. But for asthma, that doesn't happen, and you have tightening in the chest and all of this sort of stuff. So therefore, what the system is having an issue. With autism, you can see that same pathophysiology in the brain, because it's a neurological issue. It isn't a syndrome. It isn't something that you decide to call someone if they're acting a bit odd or something. There's actual brain chemicals and brain structure that's different. But as we know, that we have brain structure and hormonal structure and body structure that for women, and we have all of that for men. And in transgenderism, even if the person has body dysmorphia, that is not a pathophysiology. It's a syndrome. It's something that people get labeled. People who are transgender, there's nothing wrong with their systems, right? Like, there's just nothing wrong with their systems. That's why it's ridiculous to me that medicine is now cutting off parts of the body that are working, right? It's not a medical problem. So if I was running the peak body of mental health nursing in Victoria, I might be saying, well, let's get to understand autism a lot more and about like what the new society is challenging for people to who may be on the spectrum, and let's think about ways, let's think about ways of helping people with autism look at the new ways of the world. Rather than trying to say, well, you're transgender, we should be saying, yes, you're autistic, but then how do we work around that?
So do you think that this has crept into people with autism simply because they're more vulnerable and an easier market? Or do you think there's other reasons that this is happening disproportionately with people with autism?
I think it's a lot to do with people being quite vulnerable. So one of the things that people with autism struggle with is that the way that our brains are wired means that we have a very black and white view on things. Something is either right or it's wrong, or it's good or it's bad. Whereas people who are neurotypical, who aren't autistic, there's a lot of grays. You can kind of go, well, yes, this may be right and this may be wrong, but there's maybe cases in the middle that things are kind of, irky, and murky, and you could kind of say, well, it was right in this circumstance, but wrong in this other one. And I think that if you are being socially taught, let's say you're an autistic female, and you say that you're being taught that being a girl means that you, I don't know, play with dolls, or you want to wear, a dress, and you want to, become a mom or whatever it may be, then you are kind of, your brain kind of goes, okay, well, I need to adapt to that because I want to be seen as normal as humanly possible, because that's like an act, the way that you, perform that. And, in radical feminist circles, we don't have to talk about what performative femininity looks like, but, we have all of that issue. Similar to boys, young autistic boys are, a lot more feminine. They're a little bit less likely to be quite aggressive. They, have their own issue. And so I think that the whole transgender thing in the autistic circles is a way to exploit that. So instead of a person with autism coming along and saying, look, I'm confused because my black and white view of the world is being challenged because I'm a girl and I don't really want to do girly things, but my OT said that girls do this or women do this and all of that sort of thing, then the guidance counselor should be saying, well, honey, that's still, student, that's part of your autism, and let's have a conversation about how we can be a girl in our own way or a boy in our own way. It often turns into, good, I've got a young transgender student in front of me, not I have an autistic student quite scared about the realities of life. And puberty is a mess for everybody. No one goes through puberty and said it was the most amazing experience of their lives. And so when you've got puberty and you've got autism going on at the same time, the world can be very confusing. And if you have an authority figure saying to you, no, you actually can, transition you, and everything, it's more likely for that student to go, oh, okay, well, I'll just do that because that makes more sense.
So they're an easy target, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely they are. And they don't know the signs of red flags or being manipulated or what that kind of thing looks like. I've often felt that if I was ever going to write a book, I'd write a book on red flags and green flags if you're dating and you're autistic. So you can memorize them, right? It's not, so you can go out and go, oh, that person's saying this. I remember reading that that's a bad thing, so I'll leave the situation, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's being manipulated quite significantly. The other problem, I think, is that with people with autism, often their hormone balance is very different. And so often autistic girls have a later puberty, usually, not every autistic girl, but generally speaking, autistic women, they have their periods later. You know, they develop like later than average. Boys, the same issue. And so if you're not developing in the same way as your classmates, and you don't feel the same way as your female or male classmates, and you are very confused about the world right now because it's very different and everything, then of course, like, wouldn't you think, well, maybe there's something wrong with me? Maybe it is this transgender thing, but it isn't. It's just, let's have a chat about autism and puberty. It doesn't have to be more complex.
So how I kind of am now seeing it is this perfect storm, really, of maybe not, you know, the nasty child catcher waiting to literally get a child, but a perfect storm of the autistic temperament or personality traits of maybe preferring to socialize online, becoming very focused on one specific thing, maybe to the point of obsession, and feeling very uneasy with changing through to the next stage of life, going through puberty, and just basically falling through this net, or being caught in the net of the transgender ideology, which is affirming anybody who says that they might be transgender. And it's, to me, it's just crazy how we can say up to 6 times more likely to be transgender if you have autism, and no one thinks that this is an issue.
Yeah, it's really
well, not that no one thinks, obviously we think it's an issue, and people do think it's an issue, but it's maddening.
And the maddening thing is the doctors are going, not all doctors again, but going along with it. And you just think, how cruel to get them to chop off body parts and be medicalised for the rest of their life. They're already dealing with autism.
It's this affirmation model, which is just causing so many issues, to affirm this in anybody who comes to your doctor's, to your surgery and says, I think I'm transgender. And basically you just have to agree.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you know, it used to be the fact when I was growing up, I feel that I'm rather old because I say that I was born in the 90s. A lot of people aren't as such. But, you know, in the back, I feel sort of weird because I turn 30 next year. But I sort of feel like I already want to stay in the good old days, right? Like when the world was kind of like, look, you know, if you're a girl and you want to be in the mud and you want to do this and you want to do that, then like, yeah, great, you know, do you want a shovel for your birthday? Like, it wasn't this like big kind of politicization of that. And if you're a boy and you wanted to become a theatre kid and you wanted to have a lot of fun and all of that, like, the attitude was like, oh yeah, cool, like, you know, that's, you know, whatever. And we also had celebrities at the time who, you know, like say Bowie and Prince, who were a lot more kind of feminine in that way. Boy George, another example of that. And we had, you know, female singers like Annie Lennox, who also isn't exactly stereotypically feminine, or the late Sinead O'Connor, and all of these brilliant artists that not one of them said hashtag I'm David Bowie and now I'm trans. Like, it didn't happen. It was just that you're a boy and you're being a boy in your own way, or you're a girl.
And people accepted that.
Yeah.
You know, never thought twice about it. It wasn't like they were being treated badly by society, so then we had to bring this in, you know, to ensure that they were treated better. We accepted that. And, you know, with those celebrities, we celebrated them. So
yeah, like, you know, we wouldn't have, you know, that sort of same thing. The other thing that I sort of do worry about with the autism and gender thing is that I'm predicting, and I don't, let's see if, you know, in about 10 years I'm proven right, who knows. But I would believe that a lot of these young kids, up to say even up to 16 or so, who are being led down this like trans line, who are autistic, I reckon at least 90% of them are actually gay, right? Like they're just gay. Like, what's wrong with it? Like,
yeah.
you know, or they're lesbian or whatever it is. It's not that they're like this gender thing. It could just mean that they're gay, and guess
Well, that's
what? That's
borne out
fine.
in most of the studies that have happened up until this point. It's up in the 80s, 90% of people who are gender non-conforming will grow up to be completely normal, happy, gay adults.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to have forgotten that those studies exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe the conversation in schools need to be, well, you know, yes, you're autistic. Yes, you're a bit confused. You might be gay, but let's ride this out and talk about strategies in order to sort of make yourself feel better and your self-esteem and love yourself as an individual and all of this. Not now we have to put 3 billion chemicals down your throat and talk about, you know, the ways that we can alter your body because you're a girl and you like football, or you're a boy and you want to be a theatre kid. Like, there's nothing wrong with any of that.
No.
A lot of the detransitioners, as they call them, who have come out have said that they are on the spectrum as well.
Oh, who knew? Really?
Yeah.
It's just like, okay.
Yeah.
That happens.
It's just hard to believe, though, that they're willing to do this to kids so young, their entire life. You know, obviously there'll be some that will be happy with the decision, but like 80 to 90% won't be. And you just think, but you've said this before, Leah, that preventing them from going through puberty also prevents them from working that out. So, you know, the maturity stops. So
yeah.
Puberty blockers are, I think they target the hypothalamus in the brain.
I believe so.
And that is the area of the brain that's people say if you were to pinpoint an area of the human body that makes you human, you would go to the hypothalamus. It controls emotions, it controls everything from listening to a beautiful piece of music or seeing a beautiful sunset, being able to appreciate it. It's all from the hypothalamus, and puberty blockers come in and completely destroy the signals from the hypothalamus. What is going on?
Yeah, and can you imagine, you know, being in a body that you're already confused about society anyway, and then the part of your brain that kind of lets you there's a term in autistic communities called masking, and masking is basically not COVID, but masking is when you basically fake social situations until you make it, basically. Like you perform a social script.
Understandable for someone with autism, totally.
Yeah. So you go and you go, hi, my name is blah. What is your name? Like, basically you'd be reading out a script. And basically the hope is that enough social scripting over a vast period of time, then it becomes second nature to you, and you're now able to socialize like, you know, someone who isn't autistic. And so what the thing is that, you know, if you're being put into a situation where you're having to mask to get along anyway, and then you're then told that, like, you know, men are men and women are women, and then you've learned like 1,000 social scripts to learn to talk to a girl and learn to talk to a boy and talk about boys things or girls things or whatever, and you've learned that if a girl is there, she's like a she, her, or something, and then you've got a guy who's a he, she, and you're learning pronouns and you're learning all that, and then someone comes along and they go, I'm a they. You're going to spend the rest of your day trying to work out whether or not your life was a lie. Like, you know, where was this, like, you know, when I was learning scripts? Like, it really gets to the heart of how confusing the trans stuff and the pronoun stuff are for the average person. But then when you've like really had to learn everything, and you won't believe it, but there was a time where I had to, had a script for if I was at a restaurant. I had to look up the menu beforehand, or my parents would print it out, and then would have to do like little, kind of role play before getting there. What would you order? How would you order that? All this. And so when I got into the restaurant, I could just go from that social script. This is many years ago, thank goodness. But it is a real problem for young kids who need adults to sit down with them and say, yes, life is very, very confusing. If you weren't confused during puberty, I think I'd worry about a child. If they were just like, oh yeah, this is the most fun I've ever had, I think I'd be like, well, maybe my child's a narcissist or something. Like maybe they also need help. But if a child is coming to you and saying, look, I'm autistic, I'm very confused about the world, I'm confused about how my body is changing, I'm confused about the ways of things right now, I'm stressed with school or pressure or whatever, and then the teacher should then sit down with you and say, well, yes, it's very confusing, and yes, we can try this exercise, or we can do this, or we can do that. It shouldn't just be, okay, well, now's the time to medicate your hormones.
The problem is, though, the teachers that are coming out of universities are being brainwashed. So
absolutely.
they bring it into the classroom. So it's deprogramming them into this belief that, you're assigned a sex at birth and that a man can be a woman, that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's a whole generation. Not obviously all teachers that come through, but a large percentage do.
Yeah. When I was at uni 5 years ago or so, it was just awful with the amount of this kind of crap that was seeping in.
Yeah.
We actually had a seminar on Lady Dick.
Oh my God.
And the legitimacy of Lady Dick. And a lot of the people from my course went on to be social workers and things like that. So,
Yeah.
So they were actually falling for that, Leah. And so
Yeah.
you're watching people that you're going through university being manipulated and believing.
Yeah. And there was a man in our class who was pretending to be a woman. So no one really wanted to say anything in those it was a sexualities module. No one really wanted to speak up and say, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because if you did, he would have a massive fit.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure in the universities from people who don't necessarily agree with this, but they will write down what they need to write down in their essays and to get through the course.
Yeah, of course.
And they'll go along with it.
Yeah.
So have you noticed gender ideology creeping into your course?
Yes, but in the most hilarious way. So I have a transgender person in our cohort. She, but he, wants to be a nurse and everything. It terrifies the crap out of me. But anyway, the more problematic part of that is when I asked him what type of nursing he would like to go through and do. He replied to me with pediatrics, because it's always pediatrics. Anyway, so we were in our pathophysiology class, our biology class, and my teacher is a 5'2" Asian woman who has the attitude of a firecracker, who's been a nurse for like 40 years, trained in China. So she's very matter of fact, she's very disciplined, and she's a hardline nurse type. And we were learning about the reproductive system, and the trans student in the class said, like, put his hand up and said, but miss, some body systems don't actually reflect gender identity, and we've got to be understanding of that. So when we're referring to the reproductive system, can we just say, I don't know, the vagina, can we just say male or female? or, you know, rather than saying female system, male system. And well, my Chinese teacher really didn't like that. She said to him, well, this is nursing. If you want to look after patients who you want to call that sort of thing in your own professional practice, be my guest. But in training, there are male bodies, there are female bodies, and if you have an issue with that, then you're more than welcome to approach the, you know, coordinator of student engagement. But otherwise, you know, maybe you should shush, basically. And yes, I think there is less of the transgender stuff in TAFEs, though it is becoming quite present. There is lesser, and I think the reason for that is comparing to universities, that usually TAFEs are, you know, attended by more working class individuals, and I think the TAFEs know that if they go too woke, people will leave. Whereas unis, like the perception from our TAFE students is that people attend uni because they're already woke. They're going to be with their own kind for a few hours a day.
So Hannah, how do you think, like these young kids that are being transitioned that have got autism, how do you think they'll be able to cope with the reality that a mistake was made and what was done to their body as a consequence of that? How do you think that they could make sense of that?
I honestly think that it would be pretty detrimental to their mental health. I could see a very sad situation that people that have had this experience develop some kind of depression, some kind of bipolar type illness, something that would help them to make sense of what's happened. Because the thing is, as you both know, that once you start puberty blockers, it's basically game over then. Right? It isn't game over when you're on the surgical table, you know, having some trans therapy or you're having your sex change, whatever that is. It is as soon as you start your first puberty blocker. It's irreversible for that since day one. So it's not like you can kind of like these transgender activists, they'll make the claim of if you take the puberty blockers and you change your mind, you just stop taking them and things turn back to normal. We know that is a lie. We know that is a lie because if you fundamentally change your body's genetic makeup, it doesn't matter how long you've been taking that, it's irreversible. And I think that there should be far more communication, not just to autistic students, but students on a whole, that if you do go down the path of wanting to take puberty blocker or taking a HRT of some kind, from the moment you swallowed that first tablet or have that first injection or however it's been administered to you, that's game over. Like that is when you fundamentally are on this train for the rest of your life. And I think that if we said that to more children, that this isn't this really cool thing that you're expressing right now and you feel, or, you know, idealistic and you feel excited and whatever. If we said to kids, we don't care if you want to go down that path, whatever, but we have to let you know now that for this, when you take that first tablet, you can't go back. It's not something you can take for 2 to 3 years, go, nah, it's not me, and then they come off it. They might have a period. They might, you know, have, you know, things happen to them, but things like fertility, gone, right? Things like neurodevelopment, gone. Things like all of that, gone, just like that. And I think if an autistic person was to be told, amongst all this idealistic language that these people use, I think we owe any child to say this is game on. Like as soon as you take that, that's it. And
how do we break that narrative that's everywhere now of puberty blockers are reversible? I mean, we know they're not, but the narrative is stop taking them and your puberty resumes. I mean, it's impossible to mess around with an intricate system like that, the brain, and expect it to just go back to normal. And anyway, even if they did work, how would it work from going from a 12-year-old boy, block your puberty, and you come out the other end as a fully grown woman? How would that even work?
I think autistic kids are like smarter than that. I think that if we just said to them, and for the purpose of this interview, I'm only referring to autistic students. The neurotypical student population may have their own issue to deal with as well. But I reckon if we sat these students down and had conversations in a very safe environment, either at home or at school, and said to them, look, if you want to do this as families, we're going to back you, or whatever the situation is, but we need to tell you that as soon as you take that tablet or the injection, that's the decision made. You can't go back.
Always found people with autism highly intellectual.
They can't go, and so they
may be a bit different, but they've always high intellect.
Yeah, so you could explain it in the way that the child prefers, right? So let's say the child is, it's such a stereotype, but for this, it's really good. Let's say the child is obsessed with trains, right? Like, let's say, very stereotypical, very cliche, I know, but for this, it will work. Let's say the child is really obsessed with trains, loves trains, knows everything about trains, knows every metro network in the world, just knows everything to do with trains. If I had a son come to me who was autistic and said, Mummy, I think, I'm a girl, blah, blah, blah. I think to sort of sit down with that individual and say, well, you think you're chugging along that track, but if we change the track, direction, the train will go a different route because it's, now on a different track. And once that track has been diverted in a different direction, it's not like we can then put it back because the train is now on a whole different route. And the train can't just be like, well, I'm going to get off that train and pick itself up and put it on another track. It doesn't happen that way. And the child might intellectualize that and go, oh, okay, I can kind of understand what you're talking about. It's all about trying to make sure that message is person-centered. Because if you're going to talk about something really, sort of out there, this hormone does this and that hormone does that and whatever, the child may lose interest, But if you say to someone in the language and the way that they kind of understand things, it's more likely for that person to be like, oh, okay, now I really understand this is really, really serious. And it's something that I have to be really sure about. And the thing is, most autistic students, if that was explained to them, they'd probably be like, oh, well, that's scary. I don't want to make that decision right now. Can I have some time to think about it? Because usually autistic kids need a time to, readjust to now where, in the drawer, the spoons and the forks have been put in the opposite way. Some kids need adjustment to that. Or some kids, autistic kids need a few months to, be more comfortable with a new train timetable or a new bus timetable for the one that they use. Some autistic students may even need quite a significant amount of time to adjust to daylight savings or anything like this. So we're very cautious individuals. We don't want to jump into something too quickly because we want to know that things are in place already to help if need be. So if you tell an autistic child, this is like a huge change and it happens as soon as you swallow that tablet, I think a lot of autistic kids would be like, oh, back off.
In the same way that they're believing these authority figures that are telling them it's reversible.
Yeah.
We need to break that narrative completely, replace it.
But I think I think that the only way that that could happen is that the law needs to change, in the sense that if you're going to talk to someone who is thinking about transitioning, you first need to say a disclaimer. By the way, if you take this hormone replacement, or if you're taking a puberty blocker, these are the symptoms, these are the side effects, this is what's going to happen to you, blah, blah, blah. And if the child then, in understanding that, they maybe have to sign a form that has been explained to them. And maybe a parent needs to be present just to say, yes, that conversation did happen. And then after said communication has happened, if the child then goes no, then at least they know. But if the child goes, yes, I'm fine with all of that, then, we have to try and break that narrative. And the only way I see it happening, because you can't tell a child's, psychologist, or you can't tell a student counselor at a school, any of this, because they're way too captured. It has to come from like the top making something law, because these people don't want to go to jail, or we hope.
Or
right?
have huge lawsuits, and the parents must be always considered and kept in the loop and involved in all of these conversations.
Absolutely.
The way that they're excluding parents from all of this is just, to me, it seems like it's planned, because they know that parents, mothers, are, the biggest barrier when it comes to this, because they want to protect their kids at all costs. So we need parents in the loop. So do you think then that going for, like, me and Sue want to see gender ideology just gone totally out of legislation, out of, everyone should be allowed to do what they want as adults. I don't care what we
we're not against anyone who wants to identify which way they want. It's just, we want the ideology. Like, it's very different ideology. It's just the ideology. We're not saying to trans people, you can't be trans. They can do whatever they want. But this manipulation of young minds, and it's so wrong, just so wrong.
What would you do, Hannah, if you were the queen of the world, you had the magic wand? What do you think would be the best way to do it?
Let's say president. I am a Republican. So if I was president of the world, I think I would say that anything to do with gender, and I mean anything to do with gender, can only happen after you turn 21. Anything. Puberty blockers, like surgery, anything like that can start at 21, because most brains have kind of finished sort of developing. If you're a boy, you have to wait a few more years until you're 25. But at least it's in that time when you have, enough autonomy that what's happening, you're pretty well aware of what's happening to you. And I would say that if a child presents and they say, look, I'm under 21 and I have these, hormonal thing, and I think that I'm trans, I think under that time, I think it's okay to affirm, right? But not surgically, so if your boy child comes to you and says, like, I'm a girl, then if they want to dress up in a dress at home and run around and, think that they're Elsa from, something, Frozen, then, they can, like, do that. I'm not going to say that boy has to be put in a suit and told to, no, that's just not right. But, I suspect after a few years of doing so, they come to about sort of 15 or 16 after thinking that they were a girl at 10. And then they go, yeah, I'm a bit sick of this. And they join some sports club and they do what they need to do. But if parents if they are affirming types, I don't think there's anything wrong with at least socially affirming it. In the home, or even at school, if a teacher wants to call them their pronoun. Because the thing is, that pronoun usage and that dress or the doll's house or, you know, whatever it may be, guess what? It's reversible. All you do is you go into the bedroom, you take the doll's house out and you sell it on Facebook Marketplace. Like, that's the end of it. But if you're on hormones, that's it. So I would want to know that anything surgical, anything medical, anything to do with that, not just wearing a dress, but like anything to do with the side, like that sort of side of it, 21.
Yeah.
Nothing. No pill, no injection, no cutting off things, no nothing. And I would even start to think that I would even consider chest binding medical. So nothing like that can happen, but you can do whatever you like if you're 21.
Yeah.
Like if it's such a burning need, I don't want it to happen, because I think it's then we have to talk about, you know, those sorts of people in female spaces, bathrooms, prisons, schools, all of that. But at least no real medical harm is being done to a child.
Yeah, because once ideology is over, done and dusted, we're just going to get on with our lives. These poor kids, that's such a rough road ahead of them. And, you know, in my opinion, the most important thing at this stage are the children. We need to stop that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying 21, anything medical. After that, before that, it's up to the child's family, school community, whatever, how they want to deal with it, but nothing medical can be done until you're 21. And some people may say, well, 18 means that you're an adult. You know, you can vote, you can join the army, whatever it is. And my response to that is that, yes, you can do those adult things. And yes, you're an adult in terms of, you know, your standing in society, but, you know, like you're still mentally and physically developing.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do anything before that has completely finished.
We've got a child psychiatrist in Brisbane, Hannah. I'm not sure if you've heard of Gillian Spencer.
I have.
Yeah, and she's calling for an inquiry into the gender affirming care at the Queensland Children's Hospital. She's 71 doctors that are supporting her about this inquiry.
Wow.
We've got a health minister that refuses to meet with her over this inquiry, just won't respond.
God, can you imagine if it was on any other issue?
Yeah.
Like if, I don't know, 27 doctors all came together and said, we've got to stop people, I don't know, drinking milk because we found that milk is like harming people. You know, every health minister in the entire nation would sit down and go, okay, how do we stop people drinking milk? You know, it's a bad example, but like this one issue, doctors who are medically trained, who understand what they're doing, they understand all of this, and they're saying, well, no, we have to protect children.
Yeah.
The government goes
Gillian Spencer is a woman who cares so deeply about children, and she's being treated like shit, basically, just for doing her job, doing what is normally would be a few years ago expected of a child health practitioner to do. And she's been treated like absolute shit.
I was surprised.
Incredible. You know, like she's a senior child psychiatrist as well. So she knows what she's talking about. To have 71 doctors sign off, she could have more now, with 71 last week. And for a health minister to just refuse, just ignore any request to meet.
I think it's nuts. The thing that I think that our community could be doing a little bit better, and I think this is something that I'm a very big part, because I'm a boycotter. If I don't like a brand, I boycott. If I don't think that something is doing, you know, right things, I boycott. I've been doing BDS stuff against Israel for a very long time. I do the boycott thing all the time. And I think that what we should be doing, and it's really hard because everything's captured, but I think what we could be doing a lot better on is like a reverse boycott. So people who are doing the right thing that we support, like, if we need a child psychologist, we find someone who fits the values. If we want to like amplify a voice in an area, we find someone who's on our side, and we donate, or we go to those services instead of going to ones that we know that are just not healthy.
Yeah, people need to know more about what is going on inside the doctor's office or the psychologist's office, because I think a lot of parents who are sending their kids to therapists don't realise the crap that they're getting told to their kids. I would not send I would send my child to someone like Gillian Spencer in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, it's a really crazy situation, that's for sure. And autistic kids are feeling the brunt of it because, it's an easy victim thing. It's a, like my professional background, where I want to go, is focusing on male inmates with schizophrenia. And so I have a real understanding about victimology and why predators go out to victims and what victims show that makes a predator go, okay, well, they're easy, or they're an easy target. And when you've got a child who sometimes is nonverbal, who has sensory issues, they're a bit lost, they're very confused, they have, their own issues with that, like, that's a really easy prey, right? And so these teachers, these guidance counselors, the -18s of the world, the doctors, the everything, are acting like a male perpetrator with a physical or an emotional crime. And I know that's a shocking sort of thing, but we have to think about the strategy of this. Why is it that people with autism are far likely to be, quote, transgender? Why is it that people with autism are facing a lot more mental health issues on top of their autism, depression, anxiety, all of this? Why is that? Why is it that the fact that a lot of autistic kids are actually deciding themselves to leave mainstream schooling? Why is it that people, parents who have an autistic child, are far more likely to consider homeschooling? We have to be thinking about why. And it's not because, I don't know, that parents have decided that their jobs suck and they want to be teachers, all day. It's because they realize that the schools have been completely captured, and their child's mental health is more important than sending them to somewhere where they will be transitioned in secret from their parents. And because the child may have issues verbalizing the changes that they're going through, will not say anything, then they get anxiety, then they're a mess at the end.
It's a terrible deal for autistic kids.
And autistic adults, because you're in the workplace and you're being told that actually no, boys can be girls and girls can be boys, and you're sitting there going, no, I'm a black and white thinker, this is either a boy or it's a girl. There's no a they, it's like, that's it. And then so you have to sort of battle with workplace politics. Do I say anything? Do I not say anything? Crazy time for everybody.
And the hard part about that for autistic adults too is with the hate and vilification, the amendments, because they see it in black and white. It's going to be very hard for them not to tell the truth. And it could be, they could be charged with the hate and vilification laws.
I have a autistic friend who's also very, very peaked, and who's a he. And he said that actually calling someone by a pronoun that doesn't like suit, as in like calling a man a woman or a woman a man, he said that actually he gets like the same sort of sensations one would be having with a panic attack, because he's like, the reality is not aligning with how his brain is, and then he goes into like a meltdown because it's not real. So like, to me, that's sort of more important to prevent someone having an autistic meltdown just by introducing themselves to someone, than someone's opinion because, quote, my feelings, basically. Like, it's nuts. We're not prioritizing the right things.
Yeah, that's a good place to end it, I think. So
Okay.
Yeah, you've been really interesting, Hannah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
No problem. Well, thank you both for doing the most amazing job. It's so important. I was saying to Leah, Sue, that I was watching the interview with Jasmine, and like, I was just like, because I love her, she's just amazing. And I messaged her saying watching that video made me feel things that I didn't think I could feel because I've been peaked for so long. And she was just like, yeah, like, because it's these conversations that someone will hear something and go, oh, I didn't even consider that before. That help people come around, not necessarily an ad campaign or whatever. It's like hearing one thing that you've never heard before, thinking about it and going, oh yeah, maybe they're right. And so it's very important what you're both are doing. It's so good.
That's how we're going to win this. Just letting people know.
Yeah.
Speaking about it, because a lot of people don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we've also been going outside of the Queensland Children's Hospital. There's a gender clinic there, and well, once we've done it so far, but we're going to continue to do it with our banners and educating the public, because they're not going to get it anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll do the best we can, fight for these kids.
Yeah. It's our duty. It's our duty to protect children. That it should be everybody's responsibility. It should be everyone's priority, whether or not you've got kids. Kids should be protected.
Yeah.
The most vulnerable people.
I don't think I'll ever have kids, but for sure, you know, like, we should be protecting those who cannot protect themselves.
Yes.
And if they can't protect themselves, they need people to say, well, I'll protect you, and we'll have a conversation that will help you, rather than one of, you know, let's make sure that you're a good little submissive victim, and you will do as you're told, take the pills, bind your chest, cut things off because we tell you to.
Yeah, exactly. All right then.
All right, well, thank you both, and thank you for the opportunity, and if I can be of service in any other way, please let me know.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye.